I, Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, speak these words not to interfere, but to remind as a brother, as a son of the same land that gave birth to us both. Because there are moments when silence itself becomes a form of betrayal, and I cannot remain silent while watching the light of Africa fade away at the hands of those who once ignited it. I wish to begin with my deepest respect for you, Samia Suluhu Hassan, the first woman ever to rise to power in Tanzania, and the first female president in the entire history of East Africa. When you took the helm after President John Magufuli's passing, many doubted, yet you proved them wrong, that courage and compassion can coexist in politics. You reopened the economy after the pandemic, restored social dialogue, and rekindled faith among those who had long lost faith in power. During that time, the world saw in you not merely a leader of Tanzania, but a symbol for all of Africa. The United Nations praised you as the Light of Zanzibar, a beacon shining through the long night of prejudice and inequality. Women's movements from Ghana, Nigeria, and Rwanda regarded you as living proof that a woman can steer a nation. You once said a sentence that moved millions. If you educate a woman, you educate a nation. That phrase crossed Tanzania's borders, traveling across this continent like a declaration of faith in knowledge and dignity. In those days, many of us, the youth of Burkina Faso, saw you standing among world leaders, wearing your white hijab, and we felt proud. That hijab was not only a symbol of faith, but also of kindness, wisdom, and humility, virtues Africa needs more than ever in this turbulent age. We once called you the mother of East Africa, the one who could soften conflict and guide her people with the gentleness of moral strength. I say these things not to flatter you, but to remind that amid the storms of power, the noise of ambition, and the silence of fear, we can only preserve the light if we remember the ideals that first set it ablaze. Those ideals once brought you honor and made this entire continent proud. But today, as that light trembles, I must speak not as a head of state, but as an African brother, pained to see a symbol slowly falling into shadow. Since the end of the year 2024, a strange wind has blown across Tanzania. It did not carry the fragrance of the Indian Ocean, but the scent of unrest. What was once built upon faith is now slowly cracking under the weight of power. I say this with pain, not with judgment, because I have seen too many African leaders lose their souls at the very moment they believed themselves immortal. Tanzania, a nation once seen as a symbol of hope, renewal, and reconciliation, is now walking down the same path where many others have strayed before, a path where fear has become a tool of governance, where silence is rewarded, and where truth is imprisoned. I wish to remind, not to accuse, but to awaken. 5 great mistakes have made your image, Samia, unrecognizable to the very people who once loved you. The first mistake: electoral fraud. The election of the year 2025 was announced with a result of 97.66%, a number that seemed glorious, but instead rang like a death knell for trust. Hundreds were arrested. 145 opposition members vanished into the darkness of prison walls. There is no victory worthy of pride when it is built upon fear. The second mistake: repression. In Dar es Salaam, in Arusha, on streets once filled with smiles, now echo the sounds of screams. The people marched not with weapons, but with hope, and that hope was extinguished by violence. More than 30 lives were lost, and hundreds were imprisoned simply for daring to speak what their hearts believed to be right. I have seen those images, and they remind me of the days when Burkina Faso was suffocated under the control of others. The third mistake: the silence of information. When truth is blocked, falsehood rises to power. The internet was cut, the press silenced, and independent media stripped of their rights. In those days, it was not only the networks that were severed, it was the lifeline of democracy itself. I tell you, Samia, a nation cannot breathe when the mouths of its people are sealed. The fourth mistake: corruption and collusion. When power is used to enrich, no one remains brave enough to speak the truth. Contracts in energy, mining, and infrastructure were signed in darkness, under the hands of advisors and partners whose names the people never knew. The wealth of the state flowed abroad, while the citizens paid the price in sweat and tears. The final mistake: dependence. When a country begins to live on loans, it is selling away the future of its children. Tanzania's public debt is rising, its resources mortgaged, and its fertile lands turned into mines for foreign powers. I call that not development, but dispossession. Samia, you were once the light of Zanzibar, the light of compassion and wisdom, But today, that light guides those who are burning their own people. I understand that power can blind, and loneliness can make a leader forget the voice of her people. But remember this: when a leader begins to fear her citizens, that is the moment her nation begins to lose its future. I say this not to diminish you, but to remind you that power is not glory, it is duty, and the highest duty of a leader is not to protect her seat, but to protect the dignity of her nation. I have always believed that, in African politics, the greatest tragedy does not lie with those who hold power, but with the hidden hands behind them. Those who never appear before cameras, who carry no national flag, yet steer the destiny of entire nations with nothing more than a signature on a contract. I say this not to separate Tanzania from the rest of Africa, but to point out that what is happening there is a reflection of what once happened to us and what could happen to anyone if we do not awaken. I see three forces closing in on your nation, Samia. The first are those who wear the robes of diplomacy but carry invoices in their hands. The European Union, those who call themselves advisors on human rights yet prefer signing mining and energy deals to moral treaties. They come bearing promises of green transition support, but hidden deep within those clauses are privileges granting European corporations the right to exploit lithium, nickel, gold, and natural gas. In Kabanga, people call the nickel mine the land of our ancestors, yet now they must sign papers to leave it behind. In Geita and Bulyanhulu, gold is no longer the symbol of national prosperity but of foreign dominance. Off the shores of Mtwara and Lindi, where once there was only the sound of waves, now there is only the roar of drills from European-run gas projects. I remember my own Burkina Faso in the year 2018, when foreign companies came with promises of jobs and development. They left after taking the gold, leaving behind deep pits, dead soil, and the unemployed. And when we protested, they called it a lack of cooperation. I learned then that, in Africa, they speak of human rights when they want our resources, and they speak of development when they want their profits. The second force is China, the lender who comes with a smile and a pen. They do not arrive with guns, but with contracts. They speak of friendship, of South-South cooperation, but behind those words lie debts that will make an entire generation bow its head. They built the Bagamoyo port, the standard gauge railway worth 10 billion United States dollars, and the liquefied natural gas project in Lindi. But while those beautiful numbers are displayed on television, few see what lies beneath. The clauses that allow them to own, operate, and profit from those assets for decades. Africa has seen this before in Zambia, when the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport was nearly mortgaged to pay off debts. That is no longer investment, it is entrenchment. They do not need to seize land by armies, for they have already conquered it with finance. And the third, the most dangerous, are those from within. I call them the Directorate, a domestic network of generals, businessmen, and relatives of the government. They control security, the media, and major projects. They ignite crises to profit from them, and make people believe that instability is natural, that change is impossible. Give them power, and the nation becomes a hostage. Sign contracts with them, and the people become tools. And when they join hands with foreign capital, the country no longer has a homeland. I say this from my own experience. Burkina Faso once had the Oil Committee of the year 2021, a group of pro-French officers who sought to manipulate our resources and control our politics. I dissolved them, not because I hated them, but because I loved my country more than anyone among them. Samia, Tanzania is walking that same worn path. You are surrounded by friendly smiles, by contracts called investments, by advice called reforms, and by praise called achievements. Yet behind all of that lies a web draining the soul of your nation. We cannot allow this continent to be torn apart any longer by hands that do not belong to Africa. For every time one nation falls, all of Africa loses a part of its dignity. President Samia Suluhu, I do not come to you as a judge, but as one who has walked through the same crossroads between idealism and power. I know that feeling when all around you there is only the sound of false applause, and the voices of truth are buried. When those who once swore loyalty care only to preserve the seats beneath them. When power begins to erode, trust and loneliness becomes the only companion. I say this not to lecture, but to remind you that sometimes the salvation of a nation does not begin with a decree, it begins with repentance. Put your people first. For a leader can live without praise, but cannot live by the silence of her citizens. Listen to them even when their words are bitter, for truth is hardest to hear from those who love us the most. Look to those who once saved entire nations from darkness without ever raising a weapon. Thomas Sankara, the son of Burkina Faso, refused luxury even when holding the highest power. He cut his own salary, drove his old Renault 5, and nationalized the land to teach his people how to grow, how to live, how to believe in themselves. He did not let the nation's wealth flow into foreign pockets. He turned it into a tool for the people to stand tall. Though he was betrayed, his spirit remains the flame that keeps my people standing today. Julius Nyerere, the father of your own nation, led Tanzania with integrity and kindness. He did not accumulate wealth, nor leave behind palaces, but left behind the philosophy of Ujamaa, a society built upon human compassion, where worth was not measured by money but by trust. Under Nyerere, Tanzania was not richer, but Tanzanians were prouder. They knew they were building a nation, not an empire. And Nelson Mandela, the man who endured 27 years in prison, but upon his release, chose not vengeance, but reconciliation. He understood that hatred can never free humanity, only love can. He did what many leaders dare not. He placed the honor of his nation above his own. These three men were not perfect. They too made mistakes. But they shared one truth: they chose their people over power. Samia, you still have time to do the same. I offer you two simple acts. Humble, yet powerful enough to redeem your legacy and the future of Tanzania. First, open an independent national inquiry into violence, elections, and corruption. Invite African, not European observers to restore trust. Show your people that you do not fear the truth. Only transparency can end the spiral of suspicion. Second, convene an East African People's Congress. Gather the youth, the women, the farmers, and those who have never been heard. Let them speak, and listen to them, for it is they who keep the heartbeat of the nation alive. Do not let corporations and elites occupy the people's seat at the table. If you do these two things, I, Ibrahim Traoré, pledge that Burkina Faso will stand beside Tanzania. I will send experts, send agronomists, send my youth to help you rebuild faith. Because the dignity of Africa cannot be defended by speeches, but by action. Do not let history remember you as a bringer of turmoil when you could have been remembered as a guardian of peace. Do not let your grandchildren recall you as a tyrant when they could have proudly called you the mother of East Africa. I say this with all respect, because I believe that within you still burns the flame of the woman who once made Africa proud. That flame has not died, it is merely shrouded by the smoke of power. Let that light return, Samia. Let Tanzania rise once more, not with its fists, but with its conscience. I wish to say this not only to you, Samia, but to all who are listening to me today, to the young, to the old, to those who once believed that Africa was merely a shadow cast between two great powers. We are no one's shadow anymore. We are the light. Africa was once divided, not because we were weak, but because we were silent. Divided by language, by borders, by religion, and by the lies written into treaties our ancestors never signed. They told us we needed them to survive. They told us our freedom would bring chaos. They planted in our minds the fear of our own strength. But this generation will not be silent anymore. This generation has seen the blood of its ancestors spilled to defend every inch of land, every river, every soul. This generation understands that dignity cannot be imported. It must be built from within. When one African nation silences the weak, all of Africa is wounded. When one woman's voice is stifled, the whole continent loses a piece of its humanity. When one leader betrays their people, we all lose faith in Africa's ability to heal itself. I speak not as a judge, but as a brother. I come not to condemn Tanzania, but to remind us all that when one nation falls, the soil beneath us all becomes weaker. When one leader loses conscience, the voice of all Africa grows smaller. Samia, I know that within your heart there still lies love for this continent. Because only one who has loved deeply can make Africa so proud, and only that same person can make it so disappointed. But disappointment does not mean the end of hope. Burkina Faso will not remain silent in the face of injustice, no matter where it happens on African soil. Because silence toward injustice elsewhere is an invitation for injustice to enter our own home. I cannot stand by and watch a sister, a friend, a symbol of East Africa lose herself. If you are willing to change, I swear I will stand with you. Not beside you, but with you. Because this struggle is not between nations, it is between light and darkness within the soul of every leader. I, Ibrahim Traoré, swear that Burkina Faso will stand with Tanzania and with any nation brave enough to choose its people over power to build together an Africa that is independent, self-reliant, and filled with dignity. An Africa that is not someone else's marketplace, but the home of its own children. You are not alone, and it is not too late, because when a woman rises with conscience, the whole world will listen. Madam Samia Suluhu, I wish to end this address with faith. Faith that human beings can change, that a leader can step out of darkness and return to the light. Because history is not written by promises, but by the moments when one dares to do what is right. I believe you can still find your way back to the right path. I believe that within you still burns the flame that millions of African women once saw, the flame of compassion, of wisdom, of moral strength. People say that when a woman changes, the world changes. I still believe that. And I believe that if you change, the whole of East Africa will change with you. But if you lose the voice of conscience, it will not only be Tanzania that suffers, all of Africa will lose a light. A light that once illuminated the pride of African women, that helped young girls in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and Rwanda believe that they too could lead, that they too could build a just nation. That light cannot be extinguished by fear or by power. Do not let the light of Zanzibar, the symbol of East Africa's dawn, be dimmed by the very hand that once lit it. For when that light goes out, we will lose not only a leader, but our faith that Africa can still guide itself. I, Ibrahim Traoré, a son of Burkina Faso, swear this. If you choose to change, I will rise with you. Not to fight against anyone, but to defend the only thing left that still makes us proud, the dignity of Africa. Because Africa does not need more speeches. It needs those who dare to keep their vows. And today, I keep mine before my people, before my continent, and before you, the woman once called the Light of Zanzibar. I am Ibrahim Traoré, and I swear,